Hello all and welcome to this quick video on the Hungarian Uprising, which is what we did last lesson. So I'm just going to start with a reminder that after the Second World War, Stalin expanded into Eastern Europe. So the USSR basically controlled these other countries, so Hungary, Poland, Romania, for example, as satellite states. So he controlled it from the centre. And they controlled it in terms of their ideological and political beliefs, and these countries had to be communist and they had to follow the very strict rules the communists put forward. So what was life like in these satellite states? How were people treated in these satellite states? Well, there was a big focus on heavy industry. The communists wanted to have heavy industry, so a lot of people had to work in these heavy industry places. There were no real consumer goods, so it's not like in our society we can just go out shopping and try and make money. That's not happening. If you disagreed, you were taken as a political prisoner. So secret police was very intense in these satellite states, and you couldn't disagree with the communist ideology. And what ended up happening is, obviously in the ideal communist world, everyone is equal. But what happened is that everyone became basically equally poor, with the exception of the really top people in the party. Now, the USSR, during the war and actually after the war, were led by this guy Stalin, the Iron Man. So he controlled these satellite states with an iron fist. He didn't allow them power. You couldn't question Stalin's rule. He was this ultimate dictator. So this is where our story of the Hungarian uprising starts, with the death of Stalin in 1953. And he's replaced by this guy Nikita Khrushchev, who we can see on the right. And he's seen as a far more liberal person than Stalin. So what that means is people think he's going to give his people more freedoms. And Khrushchev seems to suggest this in 1956 when he gives this secret speech, which doesn't actually remain secret for very long. And in his speech, he promises that he's going to relax some of the controls in this satellite states and give countries like Hungary hope that actually there might be an end to this oppressiveness where they're not allowed to do anything and there's secret police and they're taken as political prisoners. So suddenly there's hope in Hungary. Now, Hungary had been led by this guy called Matyas Rákosi, and he was a good friend of Stalin's, and he basically believed in exactly what Stalin did. He was a dictator like Stalin, and he forced people into his views. And he's forced out of power in 1956, and the Hungarians are really keen to see him gone. And then, following bad harvests and things like fuel and bread shortages, people began to riot in Budapest on the 23rd of October 1956. And a statue of Stalin was smashed up by the students during the riot. So we can see that in the picture here. We've got this big head of Stalin that's been kind of smashed up. Now, to try and calm this situation, try and calm the riots and the fighting, Khrushchev agrees to appoint this guy here, Imre Nagy, and he's going to be the new Prime Minister of Hungary. Khrushchev also agrees to remove the Red Army. Remember, the Red Army is the USSR's army, and they leave Hungary on the 31st of October 1956. Between the 31st of October and the 4th of November, following the removal of the Red Army, there's a period of 5 days of freedom, and Nagy announces a number of reforms, including Hungary leaving the Warsaw Pact. Remember, that Warsaw Pact was all the communist countries joining together in their little club. And he also is promising free elections. Remember, way back when, they thought we were going to get free elections at the end of the Second World War. That's never really materialised. So suddenly, Hungary think they're going to have freedoms. However, following Nagy's reforms, so this idea of free elections, leaving the Warsaw Pact, the Hungarian government split into two, and there's a rival formed under János Kádár, he's more a kind of hardline communist who held the beliefs of the USSR. And Khrushchev, who it seemed would be more liberal, turns out he wasn't going to be more liberal at all. And he thinks these reforms are completely unacceptable, and he feared for the future because he thought if one country leaves the Warsaw Pact, there's going to be a domino effect of more and more countries are going to leave the Warsaw Pact, and he doesn't want that at all. So on the 4th of November 1956, 200,000 Soviet troops enter Hungary in support of Kádár's government. So Khrushchev and the Red Army are going to crush this rebellion. So 2 weeks of severe fighting followed during November 1956, and around 2,500 people are killed by Soviet troops and about 20,000 wounded. And then nearly 200,000 flee to the west. So they've really come down hard on this uprising. So Khrushchev is not going to allow Hungary to have the freedoms we thought they might. And finally, Nagy, who was this prime minister who thought he was going to be able to give his people these freedoms, he seeks protection in Yugoslavia, in the Yugoslavian embassy. However, he's arrested by Soviet troops. He was put on trial for treason and found guilty. He was hanged in June 1958, and Khrushchev suggested that Nagy's fate was a lesson to other leaders of the socialist countries. So it looks like these people in these satellite countries are not going to get the freedoms they wanted. So other countries have been warned, don't try and rebel against us, otherwise you will be crushed.